The airport terminal buzzed with the chaotic hum of travelers. A symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and hurried footsteps. At gate B-17, the boarding line for Flight 392 to Chicago snaked through rows of plastic chairs, passengers clutching coffee cups and boarding passes. Among them stood Marcus Langston, a 42-year-old tech CEO, his tailored suit crisp despite the red-eye flight. His dark skin gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his calm demeanor masked the exhaustion of a week-long conference. He was heading home, ready to collapse into his own bed. But as he stepped toward the priority boarding lane, a woman in a cream-colored blazer cut in front of him, her blonde hair bouncing as she planted herself firmly in his path. "Excuse me. This is priority boarding," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm, holding up his first-class boarding pass. The woman, Karen Whitmore, turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. She was in her late 50s, her lips pursed in a way that suggested she was used to getting her way. "I'm in first class too," she snapped, waving her own pass. "And I was here first." Marcus raised an eyebrow. The gate agent, a young woman with a tight ponytail, glanced nervously between them. "Sir, ma'am, I'll check your passes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus handed his over, but Karen clutched hers, stepping closer to the agent. "I've been standing here for 10 minutes, Karen said, her voice loud enough to draw stares. "This man just walked up and thinks he can cut in front of me. I'm not moving." Marcus felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, the kind that came from years of navigating spaces where his presence was questioned. He took a deep breath, keeping his tone even. "I'm not cutting. I was in line. My seat is 2A. Check the pass." The gate agent scanned both passes, her fingers fumbling. "Sir, you're confirmed for 2A. Ma'am, you're in 3C. Karen's face flushed crimson. "That's impossible. I paid for first class. I'm not sitting in coach." Her voice rose, sharp and indignant, drawing more eyes. A few passengers whispered, phones subtly raised to capture the scene. Marcus stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. "There's no mistake. I'm in 2A. Let's move this along." Karen spun toward him, her eyes blazing. "You think you can just take my seat? I know how this works. People like you always try to push your way in." The air around them seemed to freeze. The gate agent's eyes widened, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus's calm cracked, just for a moment, his voice low but cutting. "People like me. Care to explain that?" Karen faltered, but only slightly. "You know what I mean. Don't make this something it's not." The tension was palpable, a live wire sparking in the crowded terminal. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some stepping back, others leaning in. The gate agent stammered, "Please, let's keep this civil." "Ma'am, I can check again." But Karen wasn't listening. She pointed at Marcus, her voice shrill. "I'm not letting him take my seat. I paid for it." Marcus's eyes locked on hers, his voice steady but laced with steel. "You're not just questioning my seat. You're questioning my right to be here. And that's a problem." The crowd grew quieter, the weight of his words sinking in. A man in a baseball cap nearby muttered, "This is getting out of hand." A woman with a toddler whispered, "She's making a scene." But no one intervened. Not yet. Marcus took a step closer, his voice low but resonant. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've earned or what I've built. But you're ready to assume I don't belong here. Why is that?" Karen's lips parted, but no words came. The gate agent, now sweating, tapped frantically at her computer, Ma'am, I'm sorry. There's been a mix-up. Your ticket was downgraded due to an overbooking. You're in 3C. But we can. Overbooked. Karen's voice hit a new pitch. I'm a platinum member. You don't downgrade me. This is outrageous. She turned back to Marcus, her finger jabbing the air. This is your fault, isn't it? You probably pulled strings to get my seat. Marcus's laugh was short, bitter. Pulled strings. Lady, I'm just trying to get home. I bought my ticket. Same as you. Maybe check your assumptions before you start pointing fingers. The crowd was no longer just watching. A young black woman in a hoodie stepped forward. Her phone raised. Recording. This is exactly what's wrong with people, she said loudly. You can't just accuse someone like that. Karen's head whipped toward her. Stay out of this. This is between me and him. The gate agent, now desperate, called for a supervisor. The line stalled, passengers grumbling as the boarding process ground to a halt. Marcus stood his ground, his eyes never leaving Karen's. He could feel the weight of every stare, every whispered comment, every phone camera pointed their way. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about something bigger, something that had followed him his entire life. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, arrived, his badge glinting under the lights. What's the issue here? He asked, his tone clipped. Karen launched into a tirade, her words tumbling over each other. This man is trying to take my first-class seat. I paid for it, and now they're telling me I'm in coach. This is unacceptable. Marcus didn't flinch. He handed the supervisor his boarding pass. I'm Marcus Langston, seat 2A. I've got a confirmed ticket. She's claiming it's hers, but the system says otherwise. And she's got some opinions about why I shouldn't be here. The supervisor's eyes flicked between them, then to the gate agent's screen. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Ma'am, the system shows you were reassigned to 3C due to overbooking. It happens sometimes. We can offer you a voucher. A voucher. Karen's voice was a near shriek. I'm not taking a voucher. I want my seat. Marcus's voice cut through, calm but unyielding. She doesn't just want the seat. She thinks I don't deserve it. That's the real issue here. The supervisor froze, sensing the shift in the air. The crowd was no longer just a backdrop, they were part of this now, their murmurs growing louder, their phones capturing every word. The young woman in the hoodie was still recording, her voice steady as she narrated. This is what systemic bias looks like. Folks. Right here. Right now. Karen's face was a mask of fury and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to speak, but the supervisor raised a hand. Enough. We're holding up boarding. Ma'am, you're in 3C. Sir, you're in 2A. Let's move this along. But Marcus didn't move. Not yet. His eyes locked on Karen's, and in that moment, the terminal felt like it held its breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The boarding line inched forward, but the tension at gate B17 lingered like smoke. Marcus Langston stood by the jetway, his boarding pass now back in his hand, his expression unreadable. Karen Whitmore, still fuming, had been escorted to the side by the supervisor, who was trying to placate her with promises of upgrades on her next flight. Her voice carried, sharp and indignant, as she insisted she'd been wronged. Marcus could hear every word, but he kept his focus on the jetway ahead, his shoulders squared. He wasn't about to let her steal his peace. Inside the plane, the first-class cabin was a cocoon of luxury plush seats, soft lighting, and the faint hum of the aircraft preparing for takeoff. Marcus settled into 2A, a window seat, and placed his briefcase in the overhead bin. The flight attendant, a woman with a warm smile and a name tag reading Tasha, offered him a glass of sparkling water. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Langston," she said, her tone professional but kind. Marcus nodded, grateful for the brief moment of normalcy. But normalcy didn't last. As the last passengers boarded, Karen appeared in the aisle, her cream blazer slightly wrinkled now, her face still flushed. She was clutching a new boarding pass, and her eyes locked onto Marcus like a hawk spotting prey. The supervisor trailed behind her, looking harried. "Ma'am, we've upgraded you to 2B as a courtesy," the supervisor said, his voice low, clearly hoping to avoid another scene. "Please take your seat." Karen's lips curled into a tight smile, but her eyes never left Marcus. "Fine," she said, sliding into the seat next to him. The air between them crackled with unspoken hostility. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Of all the seats on the plane, she was right next to him. He turned toward the window, focusing on the tarmac outside, but he could feel her presence, her resentment radiating like heat. Tasha, the flight attendant, approached, sensing the tension. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" she asked Karen, her tone neutral. Karen didn't look at her. "Just make sure this flight stays on time," she said, her voice clipped. Then, under her breath, just loud enough for Marcus to hear, she muttered, "Some people don't belong up here." Marcus's head snapped toward her. He'd had enough. "You've got something to say. Say it clearly," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of years of suppressed frustration. "I'm right here." Karen's eyes widened, caught off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, glancing around. The other first-class passengers, mostly business travelers buried in laptops or sipping drinks, pretended not to notice. But the air was thick with their attention. "I didn't mean anything," Karen said, her tone defensive. "I just think it's unfair how some people get special treatment." Marcus leaned closer, his voice steady but sharp. "Special treatment? I built a company from nothing. I earned this seat. Same as you. Maybe more. So what's your real problem with me?" Karen's face reddened, but before she could respond, Tasha stepped in, her voice firm but polite. "Sir, ma'am, let's keep this respectful. We're about to take off." Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't going to let her words slide, either. Karen turned away, staring straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. The plane began to taxi, the rumble of the engines filling the silence between them. As the flight climbed into the night sky, Marcus's mind raced. He thought about his journey growing up in a Chicago neighborhood where dreams like his were laughed at, working nights to pay for college, clawing his way to the top of a tech industry that rarely welcomed faces like his. He'd faced people like Karen before, people who saw his skin before they saw his accomplishments. But this felt different. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter in a terminal. She was sitting next to him, her prejudice practically a third passenger in the row. Half an hour into the flight, Karen shifted in her seat, pulling out her phone. She began typing furiously, her fingers jabbing the screen. Marcus caught a glimpse of the X app open, her profile picture a smiling headshot that didn't match the scowl on her face. He couldn't see what she was typing, but he had a sinking feeling it wasn't good. Minutes later, his own phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A notification from X, a post had tagged him. His heart sank as he opened it. It was from Karen, her handle, @KarenW Platinum. Unmistakable. The post read, "Stuck next to a seat stealer on flight 392. Some people think they can bully their way into first class. Airline failed justice. Attached was a blurry photo of Marcus, taken without his consent. His face turned slightly toward the window. The post was already gaining traction, retweets, likes, and comments piling up. Call them out. One user wrote, probably used someone else's miles. Another snarked. But there were others, too, pushing back. This smells like racism. What's the real story? Marcus's hands tightened around his phone. He wasn't just angry, he was livid. This wasn't about a seat anymore. She'd taken it public, twisting the narrative to paint him as the villain. He looked at her, still typing, oblivious to the storm she'd just unleashed. Really? He said, his voice low but cutting. You're posting about me. Taking my picture without asking. Karen's head jerked up, her eyes wide. It's a free country. I can post what I want. Not when it's a lie. Marcus shot back. You're accusing me of something I didn't do, and you know it. Tasha appeared again, her expression strained. Sir, ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voices. Other passengers are complaining. Marcus held up his phone, showing Tasha the post. She's slandering me online. This isn't just a disagreement anymore. Tasha's eyes widened as she scanned the screen. She hesitated, then said, I'll get the in-flight manager. Please, try to stay calm. Karen smirked, leaning back in her seat. Go ahead. I'm not the one causing trouble. Marcus forced himself to breathe deeply, his mind racing. He wasn't just a passenger, now was a target. And with every retweet, every comment, the situation was spiraling out of control. He opened the X app, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He could respond, set the record straight. But what would that do? Fan the flames? Or would staying silent let her narrative win? He glanced out the window, the dark sky stretching endlessly below. This flight was supposed to be a routine trip home. Instead, it was becoming a battleground, one he hadn't chosen but couldn't avoid. The hum of the plane's engines was a steady drone, but it did nothing to dull the storm brewing in first class. Marcus Langston stared at his phone, Karen Whitmore's post glaring back at him. The number of retweets had climbed to the hundreds, and the comments were a mix of outrage, support, and vile assumptions. One user wrote, typical. Always pushing for what they don't deserve. Another countered, this is disgusting. Why assume he stole the seat? Marcus's stomach churned. He'd seen this play out before, online mobs forming in seconds. Truth buried under a pile of hot takes. Karen sat beside him, her phone still in hand, scrolling through responses with a faint smirk. She was fueling the fire, liking comments that backed her version of events. Marcus's fingers itched to respond, to call out her lies. But he knew better. Anything he posted now would be twisted, dissected, turned against him. He'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago, when a competitor tried to smear his company online. Silence was safer, but it didn't feel right. Tasha, the flight attendant, returned with the in-flight manager, a man named Greg with a clipboard and a weary expression. Mr. Langston, MS. Whitmore, I understand there's an issue, he said, his voice low to avoid drawing more attention. The other passengers were already stealing glances, their curiosity barely masked. Marcus held up his phone, keeping his tone even. She posted a photo of me, without my permission, accusing me of stealing her seat. That's not just a misunderstanding, it's defamation. Greg's eyes flicked to Karen, who didn't look up from her phone. Ma'am, is this true? He asked. Karen shrugged, her voice cool. I shared my experience. That's not a crime. He's making a big deal out of nothing. Marcus's jaw tightened. Nothing. You called me a seat stealer and implied I don't belong in first class. You know why you're doing this. Karen's eyes flashed, but she didn't respond directly. Instead, she turned to Greg. I'm the one who was downgraded. I'm the victim here. Why is he making this about him? Greg rubbed his forehead, clearly out of his depth. Look, we're in the air. There's not much I can do right now. MS. Whitmore, I'd ask you to refrain from posting anything further about this flight. Mr. Langston, we'll address this when we land. That's it, Marcus said, his voice sharp. She's spreading lies about me, and you're telling me to wait. Greg hesitated, glancing at the other passengers, some of whom were now openly staring. Sir, I'm sorry, but we need to keep the cabin calm. We'll file a report, and forget the report. Marcus cut in. This isn't just about me. It's about what she's implying. And you're letting it slide. Karen scoffed, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Implying. You're the one turning this into something it's not. I just wanted my seat. The woman across the aisle, a middle-aged black woman in a navy blazer, spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Ma'am, you're not fooling anyone. We all heard what you said at the gate. This isn't about a seat. Karen's face reddened, but before she could respond, a man in a suit 2 rows back stood up, his phone in hand. I recorded the whole thing at the gate, he said, his voice steady. Posted it on X. People can decide for themselves what this is about. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He opened X and saw the video already going viral, a shaky clip of the gate confrontation. Karen's voice loud and clear. People like you always try to push your way in. The comments were exploding. Some calling her out. Others defending her, claiming she was just frustrated. The hashtag Flight 392 was trending. Karen's smirk vanished as she saw the video on her own phone. That's out of context. She snapped, turning to the man in the suit. You had no right to record me. You had no right to lie about him. The man shot back, pointing at Marcus. You made this public. Now deal with it. Greg raised his hands, trying to regain control. Everyone, please. We're on a plane. Let's not escalate this. But it was too late. The cabin was alive with whispers, passengers typing furiously on their phones, the story spreading like wildfire. Marcus felt the weight of it all, the eyes, the cameras, the judgment. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. He leaned toward Karen, his voice low but firm. You started this, but you don't get to control how it ends. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her fingers tightening around her phone. For the first time, she looked rattled, her confidence cracking under the weight of the growing backlash. Tasha reappeared, her expression tense. Mr. Langston, we've informed the ground crew in Chicago. They'll meet us at the gate to handle this. Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about his daughter, Maya, waiting at home. She was 16, old enough to be on X, old enough to see this mess unfold. What would she think, seeing her father dragged into this? He'd spent his life shielding her from the ugliness he'd faced, but now it was spilling into public view. He opened X again, the video still gaining traction. Among the comments, one stood out. This is bigger than a seat. It's about who gets to belong. It was from the young woman in the hoodie who'd recorded at the gate. Her handle, at TruthTeller22, was now trending alongside Flight 392. Marcus's fingers hovered over the reply button, He typed, then deleted, then typed again. Finally, he posted, "I didn't ask for this fight. But I won't let lies define me. Truth matters." Flight 392-inch. The response was immediate likes, retweets, and supportive comments flooding in. But there were others, too, venomous ones, accusing him of playing the victim, of making it about race. He closed the app, his heart heavy. This wasn't just about him and Karen anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been judged before they could speak, every assumption that cut deeper than words. The plane droned on. The cabin lights dimmed for the night flight. Karen sat silent, her phone now dark, her earlier bravado gone. Marcus stared out the window, the clouds below a swirling gray in the moonlight. He wasn't sure what awaited him in Chicago, but he knew one thing: he wasn't backing down. The plane cruised at 35,000 feet, but the atmosphere in first class felt like it was on the edge of a storm. Marcus Langston sat in 2A, his eyes fixed on the dark sky outside, his mind racing. Karen Whitmore, in 2B, had gone quiet, her phone tucked away after the flood of notifications had clearly overwhelmed her. The viral video from the gate, now with thousands of views, had shifted the narrative, and her attempt to paint Marcus as the villain was unraveling. But the damage was done. His face, his name, were now part of a public spectacle. The in-flight manager, Greg, had retreated to the galley, leaving Tasha to handle the cabin. She moved with practiced calm, offering drinks and snacks, but her glances toward Marcus and Karen betrayed her unease. The other passengers weren't subtle, either. The woman in the navy blazer across the aisle kept her eyes on Karen, her expression a mix of disgust and defiance. The man in the suit who'd posted the gate video was still typing on his phone, likely feeding the growing firestorm on X. Marcus's phone buzzed again. A text from his assistant. "Lena, boss. You okay? This Flight 392 thing is everywhere. Want me to get legal on it?" He typed back quickly, "Hold off. I'll handle it when we land." He didn't want to escalate this into a lawsuit, not yet. But he wasn't naive. Karen's post had already done damage, and the internet wasn't known for forgetting. He glanced at Karen, who was now staring at the seat back in front of her, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For a moment, he almost felt pity. She'd dug her own hole, but she didn't seem to realize how deep it was. Then he remembered her words at the gate, "People like you," and the pity faded. This wasn't just about a seat or a post. It was about a mindset, one he'd encountered too many times before. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, the cabin rattling as the seatbelt sign pinged on. Tasha's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." A few passengers grumbled, but the mood in first class stayed heavy, the earlier confrontation lingering like a bad taste. Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He thought about his company, Langston Tech, a startup he'd built from a single laptop in his mother's basement to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. He'd faced skepticism at every turn: investors who doubted his vision, competitors who underestimated him, colleagues who whispered about his luck. But he'd never let it stop him. He wouldn't let Karen stop him now. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from his daughter, Maya. He hesitated, then answered, keeping his voice low. "Hey, kiddo." "Dad, what's going on?" Maya's voice was tight with worry. "I saw the posts on X. People are saying awful things about you. Are you okay?" Marcus's heart clenched. He'd wanted to protect her from this. "I'm fine, Maya. Just a misunderstanding on the plane. Don't worry. Okay." "It's not a misunderstanding," she said, her voice rising. That woman's racist. I saw the video. Everyone's talking about it. Marcus sighed, glancing at Karen, who was now pretending to read the in-flight magazine. Maya, listen. I'm handling it. Don't get on X. All right. Focus on your homework. I'll be home soon. Dad, you can't just let this go, she said, her voice fierce. People need to know the truth. I know, he said softly. And they will. I promise. He hung up, his chest tight. Maya was right, this wasn't something he could ignore. But he also knew the cost of fighting back. Every word he said, every move he made, would be scrutinized, twisted, used against him. He'd seen it happen to others, watched careers crumble under the weight of public outrage. Tasha approached, her expression apologetic. Mr. Langston, the captain's been informed about the situation. When we land, airport security will meet us to ensure everything stays orderly. Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He opened X again, the Flight 392 hashtag now a trending topic. The video from the gate had been reposted by major accounts, some calling for accountability, others stoking division. A news outlet had already picked it up, with a headline, Racial Tensions Erupt on Chicago-Bound Flight. His name was in the article, alongside Karen's, their faces plastered across the internet. Karen shifted in her seat, her voice low but sharp. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Turning it into a circus. Marcus turned to her, his eyes steady. You started the circus. I'm just trying to get off this plane with my dignity intact. She scoffed, but her bravado was fading. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just upset about my seat. Then why post my picture? He asked, his voice calm but cutting. Why call me a seat stealer? Why say people like you? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsettled, her hands fidgeting with the magazine. I didn't mean it like that. Marcus leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You meant exactly what you said. And now the world's seeing it. The plane jolted again, turbulence shaking the cabin. A few passengers gasped, but Marcus and Karen stayed locked in their silent standoff. The woman across the aisle spoke up again, her voice loud enough for others to hear. Ma'am, you owe him an apology. We all heard what you said. Karen's face flushed, but she didn't respond. The man in the suit chimed in, his tone dry. Don't hold your breath. She's too busy playing the victim online. Greg reappeared, his clipboard clutched like a shield. Folks, I'm begging you. Let's keep this civil until we land. We're less than an hour out. Marcus said nothing, his eyes back on the window. The clouds below were thinning, the lights of Chicago faintly visible in the distance. He thought about what awaited him: cameras, questions, maybe even reporters. This wasn't just about a flight anymore. It was about who he was, who he'd always been, and who he refused to let others define him as. The plane began its descent into Chicago, the cabin lights brightening as the captain announced their approach. Marcus Langston adjusted his seatbelt, his mind a tangle of resolve and exhaustion. The confrontation with Karen Whitmore had escalated far beyond the confines of Flight 392. Now a viral spectacle splashed across X and news outlets. His phone, still buzzing with notifications, sat dark in his pocket. He'd muted it, needing a moment to think, to plan his next move. Karen sat rigid in 2B, her earlier defiance replaced by a tense silence. She hadn't touched her phone in nearly an hour, a stark contrast to her earlier frenzy of posting and liking. Marcus could sense her unease, The way her eyes darted to the passengers around them, who were no longer pretending to ignore the situation. The woman in the navy blazer across the aisle had her arms crossed, her stare unwavering. The man in the suit was still scrolling, occasionally muttering updates about the growing online backlash. Tasha, the flight attendant, moved through the cabin, her smile strained as she collected trash and checked seat belts. She paused by Marcus, her voice low. Mr. Langston, airport security and airline staff will meet you at the gate. We're doing everything we can to keep this under control. Marcus nodded, his voice quiet. Appreciate it, Tasha. But this is already out of control. She gave him a sympathetic look before moving on. Marcus glanced at Karen, who was staring at the floor, her hands clenched. He wondered what was going through her mind: regret, anger, or just fear of the consequences now catching up to her. He didn't care. Not anymore. She'd made her choices, and he wasn't here to absolve her. The plane touched down with a jolt, taxiing toward the gate. The cabin filled with the rustle of passengers gathering their belongings. But in first class, the air was thick with anticipation. Marcus stood, grabbing his briefcase from the overhead bin. Karen remained seated, her eyes fixed on the seatback, as if avoiding the inevitable. As the door opened, two uniformed airport security officers stepped aboard, followed by a woman in a navy suit with an airline badge. Mr. Langston, M.S. Whitmore, she said, her tone professional but firm. I'm Diane Carter, Customer Relations Manager. We need to speak with both of you before you deplane. Marcus nodded, stepping into the aisle. Karen hesitated, then stood, her movements stiff. The other passengers lingered, some pretending to adjust their bags, others openly watching. The woman in the navy blazer spoke up, her voice clear. Make sure you get his side of the story. She's the one who started this. Diane raised a hand, her expression neutral. We'll handle it, ma'am. Thank you. The security officers escorted Marcus and Karen to the jetway, where a small crowd had already gathered passengers from coach, some holding phones, others whispering. Marcus spotted a local news crew just beyond the gate, their camera trained on the exit. His stomach sank. This was no longer just an ex-storm. It was a full-blown media frenzy. In a small office off the terminal, Diane sat them down across from each other, a security officer standing by the door. Let's start with what happened, she said, her pen poised over a notepad. Karen spoke first, her voice shaky but defiant. I was supposed to be in first class. They downgraded me without warning and gave my seat to him. I was upset, and I posted about it. That's all. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That's not all. You accused me of stealing your seat, took my picture without permission, and posted it online with lies. You said people like you don't belong. We both know what that meant. Karen's face flushed. I didn't mean it like that. I was frustrated. You're blowing this out of proportion. Diane's pen paused, her eyes flicking between them. M.S. Whitmore, we've reviewed the gate footage and passenger accounts. Your original ticket was reassigned due to an overbooking error, which we regret. But your comments and actions, both at the gate and online, have caused significant disruption. Karen's jaw tightened. Disruption. He's the one making this a race thing. I just wanted my seat. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with anger. You made it a race thing when you assumed I didn't belong in first class. You made it a race thing when you posted my picture and let your followers tear me apart. This isn't about a seat. It's about your bias, and you're too cowardly to admit it. The room went silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. Diane cleared her throat, her tone measured. Mr. Langston, we take these allegations seriously. We're launching a full investigation. An MS. Whitmore, your actions may result in a ban from future flights. Karen's eyes widened, her voice rising. A ban. For posting my opinion. This is ridiculous. It's not about your opinion, Diane said firmly. It's about violating our policies on passenger conduct and privacy. You photographed another passenger without consent and posted defamatory content. Karen's hands trembled, her earlier confidence gone. Marcus watched her, his anger tempered by a flicker of exhaustion. He didn't want her banned not out of kindness, but because a ban wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't change the thousands of people who'd seen her post, who'd already formed their judgments about him. Diane turned to Marcus. Mr. Langston, we owe you an apology for the mishandling of this situation. We'll be offering you a full refund and compensation for your experience. And we're prepared to issue a public statement addressing this. Marcus shook his head. I don't want your money. I want accountability. Not just for her, but for how your airline let this escalate. You knew what was happening at the gate and did nothing. Diane's expression faltered, but she nodded. We'll review our procedures. I promise you that. As they left the office, Marcus stepped into the terminal, the news crew immediately converging. Mr. Langston, can you comment on the incident? A reporter asked, shoving a microphone in his face. He took a deep breath, his voice steady. This wasn't about a seat. It was about someone assuming I didn't belong because of who I am. I'm not here to play the victim. I'm here to say the truth matters, and I won't let lies define me. The cameras flashed, capturing his words, his resolve. Behind him, Karen slipped away, flanked by security, her head down. The crowd parted, some cheering Marcus, others whispering about the woman who'd sparked a firestorm. The Chicago terminal was a blur of flashing cameras and raised voices as Marcus Langston stepped away from the news crew. His words calm, measured, but unyielding echoed in his mind as he navigated the crowd. Passengers from Flight 392 lingered, some offering nods of support, others snapping photos. The woman in the navy blazer approached, her voice warm. You handled that with grace, Mr. Langston. Don't let her get to you. Marcus managed a small smile. Thank you. I'm trying. She nodded, then disappeared into the crowd. Marcus's phone buzzed again, another text from Maya. Dad, you're on the news. I'm so proud of you. His chest tightened. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice, but the terminal was no place for that conversation. He needed to get home, to ground himself. Karen Whitmore was nowhere to be seen, likely escorted out a side exit to avoid the media. Marcus didn't care where she'd gone. Her absence didn't erase what she'd done the post. The accusation, the way she'd turned a routine flight into a public battleground. As he headed toward baggage claim, his phone lit up with notifications. The Flight 392 hashtag was now a global trend, with thousands of posts dissecting the incident. Some called him a hero, others a troublemaker. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle. At baggage claim, a young man in a hoodie approached, his phone in hand. Mr. Langston, I'm with a local blog. Can I ask you a few questions? Marcus shook his head, his voice polite but firm. I've said what I needed to say. I just want to get home. The man nodded, backing off, but Marcus knew this wasn't over. The story had legs, and it would follow him into his office, his home, his life. He grabbed his suitcase and headed for the exit, where a black SUV waited, arranged by Lena. As he slid into the back seat, he exhaled, the weight of the day settling over him like a heavy coat. The driver, an older black man with a salt and pepper beard, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Rough flight, huh? Marcus chuckled, the sound weary. You could say that. The driver nodded, his eyes kind. Saw the video. You held your own. Takes guts to stand up like that. Marcus didn't respond, his gaze drifting to the city lights flashing by. Chicago was home, but tonight it felt different, like the ground had shifted beneath him. He opened X again, unable to resist. The airline had issued a statement. We are investigating the incident on Flight 392 and are committed to ensuring all passengers are treated with respect. We apologize to Mr. Langston for his experience. It was something, but not enough. Marcus knew how these things went: corporate apologies, promises of change, then business as usual. He scrolled through the comments, a mix of support and vitriol. One post caught his eye. From @TruthTeller22. The woman in the hoodie from the gate. This isn't just about one flight. It's about a system that lets bias slide. We're watching. Flight 392-inch. He liked the post. A small gesture of gratitude. She'd been the first to call out Karen's behavior, to amplify the truth. Others had followed, passengers and strangers alike, turning the incident into a broader conversation. But conversations didn't erase the sting of being targeted, of having your worth questioned in front of a crowd. At home, Maya was waiting, her eyes red from scrolling through X. She threw her arms around him, her voice muffled against his chest. Dad, I was so scared for you. He hugged her tightly, his voice soft. I'm okay, kiddo. Just a long day. She pulled back, her eyes fierce. It's not okay. She lied about you. And people believed her. Marcus sighed, sitting on the couch. Some did. Some didn't. That's how it works. But we don't let them define us. Maya shook her head, her voice trembling. How do you deal with it? People judging you like that. He took her hand, his voice steady. You keep going. You build something bigger than their lies. And you don't let them make you small. She nodded, but her eyes were still troubled. Marcus knew this would stay with her, just as it would stay with him. He turned on the TV, hoping to drown out the noise. But the news was already covering the story, his face alongside Karen's. The headline screaming, Flight 392 incident sparks racial bias debate. He muted the TV, his head throbbing. Lena called, her voice brisk. Boss, we need a plan. The media's blowing up, and your board's asking questions. You want to make a statement. Marcus rubbed his temples. Not tonight. I need to think. Understood, Lena said. But this is big. Your company's getting dragged into it. Some investors are spooked. Marcus's jaw tightened. Langston Tech was his life's work, a beacon for innovation and inclusion. The idea that Karen's actions could threaten it made his blood boil. Tell them I'm handling it, he said. And get PR ready for tomorrow. He hung up, his mind racing. This wasn't just about him, Anna Maria, it was about his employees, his daughter, everyone who looked to him for leadership. He couldn't let Karen's prejudice derail what he'd built. As he lay in bed that night, the city's hum filtering through the window, Marcus thought about the bigger fight. This wasn't just one woman's bias, it was a system that let people like her act without consequence, that forced people like him to prove their worth over and over. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew one thing: he wasn't done fighting. Morning light spilled through the windows of Marcus Langston's Chicago penthouse. But the warmth did little to ease the knot in his chest. The Flight 392 incident had dominated the news cycle, with every major outlet dissecting the confrontation. His phone, now on silent, was flooded with messages, support from friends, requests for interviews, and a few hateful comments that slipped through the cracks. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee untouched, scrolling through X. The airline stock had taken a hit, down 3% in pre-market trading, with analysts citing public relations fallout. Karen Whitmore's name was everywhere. Her X account now private, but screenshots of her posts circulated like wildfire. Maya shuffled into the kitchen, her eyes puffy from a sleepless night. "Dad, you're trending again," she said, holding up her phone. "They found out you're the CEO of Langston Tech. People are saying you're some kind of hero." Marcus shook his head, his voice weary. "I'm no hero, Maya. I'm just a guy who wanted to get home." She sat across from him, her expression fierce. "You stood up to her. That matters. People are listening." He managed a small smile, but his mind was elsewhere. The board had called an emergency meeting, and Lena had already warned him that some investors were nervous about the company being linked to a controversy. Langston Tech was on the verge of a major deal with a global retailer, and this kind of publicity could spook them. Marcus had spent years building a reputation for excellence, for breaking barriers in an industry that rarely welcomed black CEOs. Now, one woman's actions threatened to overshadow it all. His phone buzzed with a call from Lena. "Boss, the board's ready. They want your take on this. And the retailer's asking for a meeting. They're worried about the optics." Marcus rubbed his eyes. "Set it up. I'll handle the board first. And Lena, find out everything you can about Karen Whitmore. I want to know who she is." "Already on it," Lena said. "I'll send you a file." By noon, Marcus was in his office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The board meeting was virtual, faces staring back at him from a screen. Most were supportive, but a few, like Richard Hensley, a silver-haired investor with a penchant for caution, were skeptical. "Marcus, you know we trust your leadership," Richard said, his tone measured. "But this incident is a distraction. We need to distance the company from it." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady. "Distance ourselves. This isn't about me causing trouble. It's about a woman who targeted me because of who I am. If we back away, we're saying that's okay." Richard frowned. "I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying we have a deal on the line." The retailer spooked. "We need to focus on business." "Business doesn't mean ignoring what's right," Marcus shot back. "Langston Tech stands for inclusion. If we dodge this, we're hypocrites." The room fell silent, the other board members exchanging glances. Finally, Sarah Chun, a younger director, spoke up. "Marcus is right. This is a chance to show what we stand for. Let's issue a statement supporting him and call out the airline's mishandling." The board agreed, reluctantly in some cases, and Marcus felt a flicker of relief. But the retailer meeting loomed, and he knew it wouldn't be as simple. Lena sent him the file on Karina, marketing consultant with a history of complaints about unfair treatment at various companies. Her X account, before it went private, was filled with posts about entitlement and reverse discrimination. It painted a picture of someone who saw herself as a perpetual victim, quick to lash out when challenged. The retailer meeting was tense. Their CEO, a white man named Paul Grayson, expressing concern about the publicity. "Marcus, we admire your work," Paul said, his voice smooth. "But this incident is complicated. We don't want to be associated with controversy. Marcus kept his tone even. The only controversy is a woman's prejudice and an airline's failure to act. I'm not the one who made this public. She did. Paul hesitated, then nodded. We'll need some time to discuss internally. But we're still interested in the deal. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a loss either. Marcus left the call drained but determined. He wasn't going to let this derail his company's future. That evening, he met with a local reporter, a black woman named Aisha Brooks, who'd reached out for his side of the story. Over coffee, he laid it out the gate. The post. The fallout. Aisha listened, her pen moving quickly. This isn't just about you, she said. It's about every black person who's been questioned, dismissed, or targeted. What do you want people to take from this? Marcus paused, his voice steady. That we're more than their assumptions. That we belong, same as anyone else. And that silence isn't an option when someone tries to take that away. Aisha's article went live the next morning, a powerful piece that framed the incident as a microcosm of systemic bias. It was shared widely, amplifying Marcus's voice. The airline issued another apology, this time announcing a review of their diversity training and passenger policies. Karen's name faded from the headlines, her silence deafening. But Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. The internet had moved on to the next story, but the scars remained. He looked at Maya, who was reading Aisha's article, her eyes bright with pride. You did it, Dad, she said. He shook his head. Not yet. But we're getting there. A week after Flight 392, Marcus Langston stood in the conference room of Langston Tech, addressing his employees. The room was packed, faces of every color and background looking to him for guidance. The Flight 392 incident had faded from the headlines, but its impact lingered in the news, in the company, in Marcus's own heart. He'd spent the past days navigating media interviews, board meetings, and talks with the retailer, who'd finally signed the deal after a public show of support for Langston Tech's values. I know you've all seen the news. Marcus began, his voice steady but warm. What happened on that flight wasn't just about me. It was about the assumptions we face, everyday assumptions about who belongs, who deserves, who gets to sit in the front. I didn't choose that fight, but I chose to stand up. And I'm asking you to do the same. He paused, scanning the room. Langston Tech isn't just about code or contracts. It's about building something better, a world where no one's judged before they're heard. That starts with us, right here. The room erupted in applause. His team's support a balm for the wounds of the past week. Maya, who'd insisted on attending, stood in the back, her smile wide. Marcus felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for her, for the future she'd inherit. Later that day, he received an email from the airline CEO, a formal apology with a promise of concrete changes, mandatory bias training, stricter passenger conduct policies, and a public campaign promoting inclusion. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Karen Whitmore had vanished from the public eye, her X account deleted, her name a footnote in the story. Marcus didn't care about her to face her own reckoning, whether through her conscience or the consequences of her actions. That evening, Marcus and Maya sat on their balcony, the Chicago skyline glittering below. She leaned against him, her voice soft. Do you think things will change, Dad? Like, really change? He looked out at the city, his answer honest. Not overnight. But every time we call out what's wrong, every time we stand up, we push it a little closer. That's what matters. Maya nodded, her eyes bright. I'm going to be like you someday. Standing up, no matter what. Marcus hugged her, his heart full. You already are, kiddo. The next morning, Aisha's article was picked up by a national outlet, sparking a broader conversation about bias in public spaces. Activists reached out, inviting Marcus to speak at events, to lend his voice to the fight. He accepted a few, not for the spotlight, but because he knew silence wasn't an option. Langston Tech launched an initiative to fund STEM programs for underrepresented youth, a tangible step toward the change he wanted to see. As he walked through his office, employees stopping to thank him, Marcus felt the weight of the past week lift. Just a little. The incident on Flight 392 had been a spark, igniting something bigger, a reminder that progress wasn't a straight line, but a fight worth having. He wasn't a hero, just a man who refused to be defined by someone else's prejudice. And in that refusal, he'd found his voice, his purpose, and a way forward. The city hummed outside, alive with possibility. Marcus looked at the horizon, his resolve unshaken. The fight wasn't over, but he was ready for whatever came next.